Hey everyone, this is KHALIL MAASI here with my co-host Alexandria Williams and our guest for today, Vincent Lin, and we're inside the action studio. Now, Vincent Lin is a Hong Kong martial arts action film icon, a fashion model, a musician, and a humanitarian, a real-life superhero. We're going to talk about all of those things, but first I want to go back to his early life because I found that I have something in common with you.
Really?
Coming from a martial art lineage, coming from a family that does martial arts, growing up in the martial arts, I want to talk about the beginning of your life.
Okay.
And what was that like growing up, doing the martial arts? What was expected of you? How did you feel about all that?
Oh dear. I have a British mother and a Chinese father. My father was in the military, but I was actually born in Yemen because he was stationed in Yemen. But my formative years was growing up in England. And so, as many know, Kung Fu has been in my father's side of the family, and we actually can date it back to the beginning of the Ming Dynasty, which is 1368. So, like many family styles of Kung Fu are named after the family. Like Hong Gar and Choi Gar and Li Gar, right? So our family style is Ling Gar, and of course the Gar actually in Chinese just means family. So Ling family, right? We can date it back to that period, and of course that period it started actually in the north of China, but eventually came south. So within the past maybe few hundred years, we know it's predominantly a southern style. So in terms of its, the geography of China in the south, it's very, very heavily populated. It's very tightly knit in terms of claustrophobic in terms of people. So it's a southern style which is predominantly an enclosed fighting style. But it wasn't an enclosed fighting style like say Hong Gar, which was predominantly very open stance, low stances. This is more upright. And so many of the concepts of Wing Chun, which is of course probably the most well-known of Kung Fu styles, had many of its roots from our family style. So the concept of the straight line principle and so forth, came from Ling Gar, which a lot of people don't know.
So Ling Gar preceded.
Preceded, yeah, because we're now talking 750 years as opposed to Wing Chun, which historically we know is around 350 years.
Wow.
But my start of it was watching many family members of my father would come to visit us. And they would come from the West Indies, or they would come from China, they would come from Hong Kong, they would come from Malaysia, they would come from Indonesia, because our family is all over the world. And they all were practitioners. And some were practitioners of Tai Chi, so I actually started Tai Chi at a very, very young age, like 7 or 8. And then my father had 2 older brothers. One was a guerrilla fighter in the Chinese army, Imperial Army, who fought against the Japanese when they invaded China. So here was this, real kind of killer, which he was. And then we had this other uncle, who we call Abak. And he was a grandmaster of Tai Chi and Qigong. And really the true practitioner of the family's system. And it's he who I actually studied with. So he would visit us a lot. He would spend time in Hong Kong with the family, and because we had family in Trinidad, we had family in Jamaica, because my father was born in Jamaica. And so he would spend his time traveling the world, visiting everybody. So whenever he would come to England, and then eventually when we emigrated to America, he would come to the States, is when I got time to actually be with him and study with him. And this was aside from my actual traditional practice of going to an actual Kung Fu school, but that was a separate thing. Because I actually did study Hong Gar as well, and Choi Li Foot.
No, that's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask, did you only train with family, or did you actually train in
No,
school?
no. I studied both. I felt it was, I wanted to go to an actual school, so I got to go 3-4 days a week and practice with other students. It was important. Yeah, not just to practice with my uncle, which was really more important, but he wasn't always around. So, yeah. And what he expected of me, he had, interestingly enough, he had 5 sons, and he never taught sons. Yeah, they all studied with different masters in China. And this was a period like during Cultural Revolution where people would practice to live, you know, to kill the enemy. It wasn't a practice, here we're going to go to the dojo and practice. No, it was a completely different mindset, and it was for survival. And so when he would come for the summer, let's say, and I would study, it was basically, he would teach me, you know, a few things, and then would go away and say, okay, practice. And if it wasn't perfect, by the next time I saw him, I would be one of his sons, and he would never teach me again. So, yeah, it was very like old type of. And actually, one of the first early stories, I was a young teenager, and it was winter, and my uncle had come to visit, and every morning he would go outside at 5 a.m. and snow, there's frost on the window, and my father came in the bedroom and said, shaking me, say, Vincent, you know, you need to get up, you need to go, and your uncle is practicing, go outside and practice. And, you know, young teenager, you just not want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I'm rubbing the frost off the window, and I'm like peering through the window, and my uncle's standing outside, and he's standing there with like a t-shirt on, right?
Cold.
And he's standing there in a crane stance, I remember this, and he has his hands in front, and he looked like he was actually frozen from, and I'm like, he's not moving, is he frozen? And so I fell back to sleep, and 15 minutes later my father came in, shaking me again, get up and practice. And so, you know, I'm looking out again in the window, and he's still standing there. Eventually my father came with a glass of water, and he threw it in my face. This is how, you know. So I got up, I put all the clothes, the scarves, you know, everything. I looked like, you know, the abominable snowman to go outside and practice. And the thing is, I think I wish, looking back, I just wish I had paid more attention. I really do. You know, God bless his soul, but I wished, because I was young, and you want to, you know, now Bruce Lee is on the scene, and I'm like, he doesn't, this is, Bruce Lee doesn't do this, you know? I want to move fast and all this stuff, and kick, and, you know, so I really wish I had paid much more attention, but, you know, it took me half my life to figure out what he was doing really was for long life.
Any other siblings?
A brother.
Yeah, brother. He trained as well.
No.
Okay.
No. I was the one that got that, yeah.
But you did train very well, and you trained a lot. I know you wish you trained more, because you did win a lot of competitions.
Yeah, I did, but again, I found that, you know, it was, I spent the first 10 years, and it took me 10 years to get like the first like black sash, right, or black belt, if you want to call it like that. Because it was traditional, there was no belt system. You were a beginner, and whenever the Sifu thought you were ready to take that first degree or whatever, it was up to him. And it was more than a decade. But as I've told students in the past, now all I was an advanced beginner. That's all. I learned a bunch of techniques and forms and weapons if I was lucky, and you had them at a good place, but you're just an advanced beginner, that's it, you know. And now the real practice really begins, you know. So to answer your question, Alexandria, yeah, just like any martial artist, you know, you enter form competition, you enter, you know, kumite and stuff. But it, and that was wonderful. I mean, it was great. But again, it was only a small portion of really what I was supposed to be practicing, you know,
I know for myself in the martial arts, there's a point when I was, because my father was my first teacher, there's a point when you're doing it because you have to, then there's the point where it becomes I'm doing it because I love it. So I fall in love with it. So when was that for you?
It was...
Alex dropped her phone.
It's me.
She dropped her phone. And we all
pretty
try to
clumsy.
act like she didn't, did
Yeah. I drop things frequently.
Holy moly.
So
Can't compete
I've
with
been
that.
working out.
I know, I'm telling you. It happened... It happened really early, surprisingly, yeah. Even though I knew it was in the family, but I really didn't start doing the research until 20 years later.
Yeah.
I mean, really researching the family's history, going to China, speaking with family, visiting the village where this kind of all began, and then starting to write, you know, the articles. I mean, I was the first one of the family to actually get it out there, where it was written about, you know.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, the martial arts historian and, you know, great Wing Chun grandmaster, Dr. Leung Ting, who also studied under Yip Man, he had written 2 books about my family style.
Okay.
But they were kind of more kind of magical kind of stuff like that. You know, it wasn't real factual stuff. So yeah, I started doing the research and started writing articles for many, many martial arts magazines. And then of course, you know, many years later, I wrote, you know, my first book on the family system and other things. So yeah, but I think it happened really, really early. So I was never like forced to practice. Yeah, I wanted to practice. You know? Yeah.
You actually learn better when something you want to do. How many styles did you actually learn? Your family style?
I studied in classroom. I studied Hung Gar and Choi Li Foot. And I can't say that, I would never want to say, especially on camera, that I mastered those styles. No, I studied them for a long, long time, many, many years. And it was a great foundation. But yeah, you know, I'm sure you will vouch for me here saying, and it drives me crazy, especially in this kind of generation, this YouTube generation, that now everyone is a master.
Oh, yeah.
And the sad thing is the things you see, it makes me cringe, you know, that all these people who come up with these so-called new styles and give it a name and then add the dough on the end, right? So it's basically telling us that, oh, I studied a bit of that and I studied a bit of that and I made up my own thing. How is this possible? This is ridiculously wrong. I mean, it's very sad, you know, and I've seen from when I was young, now having studied martial arts 50 years, God, that sounds so long. That sounds so long.
I sound ancient now, huh?
Jeez. Yeah, I mean, it has not come to a good place. And it's very unfortunate.
And we're going to get more into the whole entertainment side of your life in a little while, but at what point did you start? Was music anywhere involved in that part?
They were always, they always paralleled my life because obviously we've been talking about my father's side of the family, but my mother was the professional musician.
Okay.
So I basically started them at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my mom actually was my first piano teacher.
Okay.
So it was a few years after. I didn't start piano until I was like 11. But they have always paralleled my life.
Is that what your mother was, a musician and piano, or
Yeah,
did she do
no,
more
she actually played like 6 instruments.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but her and her sister, they were actually a famous duo, and they played on the BBC. They had their own radio show in England. Yeah, so they were quite well known.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
So it's not nepotism, because they were young. They didn't do it as adults. They were like, they started from this high through their teenage years. Yeah.
We have a little bit of time left in
Okay.
this segment. So what I want to ask you real quick, because again, we talk about classical martial arts, the ancient days and such forth. Most martial arts who were renowned throughout history studied multiple arts. They didn't just do martial arts.
That's true,
They did
yeah.
calligraphy, music,
Yeah.
martial arts.
Yes,
Some
yes,
of them
yes,
were
correct.
actors and so
Yeah.
forth like that. So did those two things kind of counterbalance one another, the music and the martial arts?
Always. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. One of the first major articles that came out, you know, they called me the odd couple, right? Because of these two things, and that was one of the questions I was asked for years. Was, don't you ever worry about your fingers? You know, because I said, well, why would you ask a question like that? Well, you know, you break all those boards, and I said, I don't do that. I don't break boards or stone or no. You're getting the wrong idea. Yeah. So no, it's always balanced, and it's been a good balance.
Cool. All right, well, so we're going to take a break here, and we're going to come back to Inside the Action Studio with Vincent Lin to talk more about his life in entertainment and his humanitarian work. All right, we'll be right back.
I've got a tough subject to talk to you about, and there's no easy way to say it. So I'm going to tell you the hard truth right now. Children all over the world are being sold into slavery. I know, it's hard to really take this in. So let me say it like this. Imagine yourself for a moment, abducted from your life today, literally taken away from your office, on your way home, while you sleep, taken away from your life. You're taken to a place far, far away, forced to work 19 hours. You're forced to sleep on the ground, under the constant threat of torture and possible disfigurement. You, right now, taken away. These are real people, children, innocent children, taken every single day. And these lives are no less valuable than yours or mine. And yet they are bought and sold for as little as $20. It's $20 per child. It's $20 per life. But I have something real that we can do together. Right now, right here, today. Challenging Heights is an organization whose aim is to free child slaves. We are going into the slavery camps and saving children. And once they've been saved, they are immediately taken to a shelter, a safe house, where they receive food, shelter, education, and psychological care. These children are given back their lives. I'm going on these missions to help save children, and we need your support. For as little as $30, you can help us save a life. For these innocent children's lives. Please help me save them today.
To help save children, go to wecansavechildren.com and pledge your support today. Even $30 can help save a life. Help us today, and from all of us at Challenging Heights, thank you.
Welcome back. I am Alexandria Williams. This is my co-host MAASI and Vincent Lin.
Hey, hey.
We are back inside the studio, and we are going to start off talking about some of your entertainment achievements.
Oh, no.
I know you got started in modeling, right? You started with modeling first, or did you start with some
actually,
acting first?
Well, the modeling, but it was, I wouldn't call it modeling, you know, it was a few things here and there, but it wasn't at the level it was until after I started film.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it even counted, especially if you haven't made any money at it.
Really? That's good to know, because I actually thought you started with the modeling
Yeah,
first.
no, I mean, I can say I did, but not I wouldn't call myself a professional model at that time. It wasn't until I started film in Hong Kong that I then got signed with Elite.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
interesting.
That is
Get it? We got to get it straight.
Yeah,
here.
no, I thought you started with modeling first. Okay.
I mean, we are inside the action
Action
studio,
studio.
so we got to
Yeah.
get
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
factually straight.
No, that's interesting to know because
Yeah.
I wasn't sure which did come
Yeah,
first.
yeah. I mean, like I said, I was doing a little, but I wouldn't count it. I wouldn't go out saying, "Well, I'm a model," you know, whatever that means. Yeah. Yeah.
So what made you decide to go to Hong Kong to start acting and getting into
Well,
acting?
that's an interesting thing because it was a very, very well-known photographer, and he wasn't a modeling photographer. He actually did like advertising and you know things like shooting cars and stuff like that. But he did a lot of photo shoots of me, you know, martial arts, and because he was Chinese, he said, you know, you ever thought of going to Hong Kong? And I you know, yeah, hasn't everybody thought of going to Hong Kong? He said, it would be good, you know, you've got family there and you've been before. He said, now they're shooting a different kind of film, you know, not so much period film, but, you know, more kind of cops and robbers, that type of stuff. I said, do you know anybody I can, you know, talk to? So he knew of a director, and he said, look, I'll give you this name, you can meet him. Obviously, like anything, you can't promise anything. And so, you know, I just took it upon myself. I flew out to Hong Kong. I met with this gentleman, and he then put me in touch with 4 different film companies. Obviously, the most famous was Golden Harvest. So I got to meet Raymond Chow, Sammo Hung's company. Let me see, I think the other one was Cinema City, and then there was D&B. And D&B was a kind of a fairly new film company owned by the entrepreneur Dixon Poon, who ended up marrying Michelle Yeoh.
Okay.
Wow.
And started her career. And I met with all 4, and there was really nothing happening except with D&B. They had already started the production of Tiger Cage.
Okay.
And, you know, it wasn't, okay, we're going to hire you. It took me a couple of times going back and forth on my own dime, you know.
Wow.
I finally met Yuen Wo-ping. And the film had already been casted. But he liked me, and he changed the cast of me actually taking the role of the woman who was supposed to play the kind of the lead villain, but I took that part, and she kind of played my, I guess, kind of girlfriend, sidekick, or what have you. And that's how it started. Yeah, that's how it started. And of course, that film, as we know, became this international hit because it was Yuen Wo-ping's kind of comeback film after starting, you know, Jackie Chan's career. Yeah.
So at that point, now I'm interested even more now because you say you went to Hong Kong, then got your start in the industry. So at what point did the modeling come in? And I know you were doing the music around that time even more also.
I was doing, working with Polygram Records. And that, again, even started before the modeling. So it wasn't until I was in Hong Kong 2 years. So by that time, I had probably done at least 10 films already. And then I was working with Polygram, so I was writing for some of the Hong Kong pop stars.
Okay.
And then I got signed with Elite. And that was quite amazing because, you know, I modeled for, I mean, you name it, every major kind of brand name, you know, from Gucci, Yves Saint Laurent, you know, Levi's, everything.
So this was mostly in Asia, or was this international?
No, this was, well, yeah, it was all over Asia. So we were in Japan, we were in Thailand, China was just beginning to open up, you know, the market there, of course, all over Hong Kong and and then of course that led not to just the modeling in terms of runway, but it was, you know, photographic magazine, commercial.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I was actually the only Westerner to actually garner all of the entertainment in terms of the whole industry, in terms of modeling, music, and film.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then of course TV, because that was commercial. And
Yeah.
stuff. So yeah.
So as far as music, what were you putting out for music at that time?
I had, let's see, at that time, in Hong Kong, it was writing for what they call canto pop, as in Cantonese. So the, you know,
Okay.
Obviously, I didn't write the lyrics, so they would bring in a lyricist.
But you did with the...
Yeah, and one of the actually very famous lyricists, his name is Pun Wah Yun, who wrote like some amazing lyrics for so many of the big pop stars in Hong Kong. So yeah, so that's what I was doing then. Yeah,
Music.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You played, I believe, over here at Carnegie Hall.
Yeah, 4 times.
4 times.
Four times at
11,
Carnegie Hall.
13, 2011, 13, 14, 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, 50. So that was pretty recently too.
Yeah, yeah.
And what that was classical.
Some of it was classical, but most of it was, even though I went to the Conservatory for Classical Piano, but my love is jazz.
Okay.
So a lot of the music, I'll take very famous classical themes that we all know, and then kind of change them into a kind of a jazz, Brazilian, bossa nova, merengue, samba, that type of thing. Yeah.
That's awesome, because it's not easy to play Carnegie Hall. You
Yeah,
have to be
no,
pretty
that's true.
amazing.
Yeah.
You have to be pretty amazing to play that.
Yeah.
So as far as going back to stunts and martial arts, I know you've worked with Jackie Chan. How did that come about? Like, how did you guys get together? How did you guys meet? How did that whole interaction happen?
I actually, interestingly enough, the first time I met him was in 1987. And I was visiting Hong Kong with a friend, and we were sitting in the lobby of the Regent Hotel, and Jackie Chan walks in with like 4 guys, you know, bodyguards, what have you. I'm like, oh my God, you know. And he's sitting all the way down on the other side, and my friend says, "You should go down and say something." I'm like, "What?" You know. And I had my like Z cards, you know, modeling cards, what have you. And I said, well, maybe I can go and ask him to sign it, you know. And of course, there were 3 photos. It was a headshot and like martial arts poses kind of thing. So I said, you know what, I've got nothing to lose. So I went down, and as I got close to the table, you could see these 4 guys, their body language kind of like did this.
On
You know?
alert.
Yeah. But yeah, he saw the photo and he said, oh, you study martial arts? I said, yeah, a long time, and you know. And so he signed this photo, which I, you know, still have. And so, who would know that? Because I hadn't even started film. You know, who would believe that? That 4 years later, I'd be actually co-starring with him. So it's pretty amazing.
Okay, so you hadn't
So you met
even
him.
you weren't in
No,
film
no,
yet.
no. I wasn't in film. But the first time I was there, I was, you know, just visiting, and he walks in, and yeah, who would believe that? And of course, I reminded him later. I actually showed him the photo. I said, "You don't remember signing this?" He says, "No." I said, "Wow, that's amazing." Yeah, but you know, Alexandria. I mean, I did actually 19 films before I got to work with him. Yeah. So, and of course, at the time, I thought, you know, this is I'm going to be able to do this standing on my head. It's not going to be. It's going to be easy. I have all this experience, and no. First few days, I felt like I had 2 left feet. You know. Yeah, I was nervous. Probably more nervous. It took me a while to kind of loosen up. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, since we spoke about Jackie Chan, Cynthia Rothrock, What was, how, you know?
Well, we're like, you know, we're like really best friends.
I probably stole that question from
Yeah,
you.
no. I mean, we've known each other 3 decades. That's just crazy, you know. And become really good friends over the years. But that, working with her was actually the second film, was right after Tiger Cage. Yeah, Blonde Fury.
Yes.
Which is also called Lady Reporter. But and that was because of the success of Tiger Cage. I got called by Golden Harvest. They had already shot Blonde Fury a year hence with another director, and they brought, you know, the famous Corey Yuen, who's done all the transporter stuff, to come in and beef up the action. And so they wanted to add some new scenes, and so I got called to come in. Yeah, so
That's awesome.
why not? Yeah. Yeah.
So as far as stunts, do you only do martial arts, or do you do falls, driving, or anything else?
Well, look, prior to going to Hong Kong, I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. I mean, I studied martial arts. I had to study film or reaction or stunts or choreography. No, never seen that before, only seen it sitting in the audience, you know. So you learn it as you're going. Yeah, and of course, they expect
You to know it.
they expect you to learn it, and they expect you to do it. You know, they expect to bring in a double, and that's something really crazy. But no, I mean, one had to learn it as one went along, and it was really difficult. Yeah, you know, and painful.
Was that the same?
That was my next question. Any injuries or
Yeah, it was painful. I mean, you know.
doing all your own stuff? Yeah.
I mean, even on Tiger Cage, just some of the dumos and the turns and the twists. I've never done any of that kind of stuff. And yeah, you know, once you learn it and you do it on the mats and you think, okay, I've got this down, and then they take the mats away and you got to do it on the concrete. You know?
Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
Obviously, you don't want me to last long in Hong Kong. You know? So
Was that the same thing for as your acting training? Did you have any training prior, or was it?
I had actually studied at Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts when I was in England. But this is Shakespearean acting.
Yeah.
This is not going to help you in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, my dear, Alexander. No, it's going to be like, you know, got to make that face, you know. Yeah. It doesn't mesh. No way.
Interesting. So not even any of the emotional training or anything.
I did a year at the Actors Studio here in New York.
Okay.
But again, it didn't help.
Yeah.
No, it didn't. Any improvisation didn't help at all. It's one thing I found, that if you have a really good director,
They'll bring it out of you.
exactly, and that's what happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
they will bring it out of you. Yeah.
Which is good, because a lot of people think, go acting coach, go to acting classes, do all this. But for some people,
Yeah, for some people it doesn't work. No, and I'll remember the first setup scene in Tiger Cage, where I'm sitting in this boardroom with a long table, and I'm this, you know, in the silk suits, and my henchmen are on the side, and it was Michael Woods and Stefan Berwick, you know, and Simon Yam, the great Hong Kong star, sitting on the opposite side. We're having this back and forth, and I'm having this conversation, and I'm thinking I'm talking kind of like, and Yuen Woo-ping comes, no, keep your face still, like frozen. And then I would start talking, and immediately I start talking, I would like turn my head, you know, just like we are here, and no, keep your head still. And I'm thinking, but I would never do that.
Yeah.
But then when I see it on the film, I understand why he was asking me to do that. Yeah. You know, so it's all about the director.
yeah.
Well, a lot of fascinating stuff, and we could talk about so much more, but we're going to move on now. We're going to take another break, and we'll be back with the Renaissance man himself.
Oh.
Here at Ironbound Studios, inside the Action Studio. MAASI with my co-host Alexandria Williams and our guest Vincent Lynn, and we're back to Inside the Action Studio. Before we go further talking about Vincent Lynn's life right now, what he's doing, his humanitarian work and other projects and such forth, I want to throw a question. I want the super producer, Edmund Umoja
from St. Lucia.
Edmund from St. Lucia.
Herman to ask a question.
Should I say Seafood Lynn?
Vincent Lynn is
Vincent
fine.
Lynn.
Yeah.
In the first segment, you spoke about your links to the Caribbean. Can you expound more about what?
Would you like me to talk it in Jamaican, you know? Well, my grandfather, who left China when he was in his, I think, 27 years old, it's actually a book in itself. It took him 6 months before he got to the West Indies when he left China. So he first went to San Francisco. It actually was Hawaii, then San Francisco. He was not liked in San Francisco because he still had the queue. And that was the time when they were still using the Chinese as slaves to build railroads and stuff. So he didn't stay long in San Francisco. And then he went down to Panama. Panama, he ended up in Jamaica. And that's where my father was born. And many of our family came to Jamaica, and we had bicycle stores and grocery stores, supermarkets, machine shops, and motorbike stores and stuff, yeah. So that's how it began.
What part of Jamaica did you base it with?
Well, they were in Black River. Yeah, on the shore. But we have family in St. Elizabeth, in Kingston, Montego Bay, yeah, Negril, yeah. So all over the place.
Interesting. So, we may be related.
You never know.
Well, they didn't hear that part, that you are Jamaican Chinese and
Yeah,
you
my
are
father's
Jamaican
side
Chinese.
Jamaican
Can't,
Chinese.
can't you see the
They
resemblance?
have the same pretty much background.
Just
but
a little more
that's
tan
crazy.
than I
Yeah.
am.
So,
Go on, yeah.
so anyway, we are. So
Anyway.
we're going to talk about
On a more serious note,
where you are now, because I know you have a lot of things going on. I know you run a security agency, and you still got some film projects that you're developing. But I know you've
but all that stuff is
you've thrown a lot of energy into doing humanitarian work
Yeah.
now, and so
Yeah.
we wanted to talk about that. And I know Alex, we got to get Vincent to talk about
All right.
this. So.
Go ahead. Okay.
Do you have a first question you want to ask, Alex?
Well, how did you get started, and why did you decide to do this? Because I mean, a lot of people know about it, but nobody actually takes the next step into doing something about it.
Yeah. Started about 5 years ago. I was doing close protection, and I was close protection for philanthropists who were doing this amazing work in across from West to East Africa, building shelters, building clean water, solar, all these types of things, schools, and so my job was to make sure this person stayed safe. And we were in Ghana, and we were visiting a shelter where, as a shelter for children who were just being rescued from child slavery. And as we entered the shelter, there were 15 to 20 children anywhere that from the ages of 4 to 15, mostly boys, though some young girls. And as soon as of course I knew why they were here, they had just been rescued, I started getting teary-eyed. I started getting emotional, but at the same time I'm supposed to be here doing this job, and I can't all of a sudden start losing it.
Yeah.
And it was just, as I've said many times, it was the look in their eyes. They were emotionless. You could see the trepidation in their body. They were frozen. They couldn't look at you. Their eyes were like cold and like a shark's eyes. And that look, if I could draw well, I know I could bring it up today. You know, I'll never ever forget the way they look. And so I wanted to get involved, and at the time I wasn't sure how I could get involved, but that's the day it began for me. Yeah.
So what was the next step after that, after you realized this is what you want to get involved
Well,
with?
the next step was doing research and understanding the severity of child trafficking. Everything across from, you know, obviously everybody, when they think of child trafficking, immediately think of sex trafficking. But in
other countries.
in other countries, that is not kind of the main thing. It can be as well, it can be in addition to, but across most of subtropical sub-Saharan Africa, it's child slaves, and it's in the hundreds of thousands, and then of course child soldiers, or the children are used for agriculture, or they're used as I mean, it can be used as so many things, you know, especially in Civil War. They use as stoolies, they use as, you know, gophers, they use as whatever, however they can use a child. And I then started realizing, oh my goodness, that we're talking about millions here, worldwide. And so understanding, doing the research, and then speaking with people who are actually involved in this was my next step in getting involved, and being able to get involved with going on rescue and recovery of children who are enslaved. Yeah.
So how dangerous is that work? I mean, you're going in and rescuing. Obviously, these people want these slaves. So how dangerous is that work?
It's a difficult question, but it's one that it depends on where you're going. It depends on what country you're going. For example, Ghana has no conflict, right? Ghana actually has a very good, strong economy, but yet most of the children are used in the fishing industry on Lake Volta. So, not to say the rescue is still not, requires planning and everything and strategy, but it's not in terms of dangerous to one's health, right? Besides you get sick from malaria or something, but in terms of someone shooting at you or something, and then, no, that doesn't happen in Ghana. It doesn't mean that the slave master, you are taking now his business
His
away.
property,
It's not very happy about that. But he's not going to come at you with, you know, AK-47 and no, there'll be problems, there'll be screaming and arguing and shoving and pushing and fighting and stuff, but yeah, it's not lethal, let's say. Now you go to the neighboring country, I've been in Nigeria, now we're talking a whole different situation, you know, which is we're now dealing with child soldiers, and even the children might shoot you, which is, you know, what happened to a very dear friend of mine. So it really depends. It depends on where, what country, and it also depends on the political climate of the government that's in place, whether or not they actually want you to do it. And that happened to me. We were supposed to go on a mission in Ghana, in a township called Senya. It has around 40,000 people, but it's rife for where the traffickers come down from Lake Volta and just basically pick who they want. The children right there. And so, you know, can you imagine, this whole mission is set up, security, the shelters in place, the government supposedly knows about it, which they do know about it. Local police are in place, they know about it. The news are there, they know about it. And, you know, I started taking video of this place, and it looks like, I mean, everybody's happy, and there's beautiful colors of the boats, and I mean, it's so surreal, you know. Everybody's happy and walking around selling their goods and food and what have you, yet if you didn't know, children are there sitting on steps waiting to be taken. And at the 11th hour, when we're ready to rescue these children, the Ministry of Interior shuts us down. It says if you do this rescue, you will all be arrested. And so the news are there, so the head of the organization, he goes on the news, which will be that evening on national 10 p.m. news, blasting the government and all this stuff. And I turned around, and there was this little boy, and it's probably the greatest photo I've ever taken. He was sitting there, probably like 6, 7 years old, rag clothes, no shoes, no shirt. He was itching himself and scratching, you know, his groin, and you could tell he was really in discomfort. And I just shot this photo of him looking away. Just wondering, when I look at that photo today, I was wondering what was going through his mind, you know. And as we got shut down, we're walking up the steps, there were 2 girls behind him, I would say 11, 12 years old. And they were holding each other's hands. And you could see the fear. And the head of the organization, he said, by this afternoon, they'll be gone. And then I started getting angry.
Yeah.
And he made a joke. He says, God, I was just hoping to see you in action. Me, you know, taking down someone or what have you. And he made light of this, but he was a child slave himself. And so of course he has to make light of this horrible, terrible situation, horrific situation. And I'm like, we can't do anything? We could do nothing. And there's the corruption, the side of corruption that is involved in, and it just makes you ill. And it just makes you, God, you know, what am I doing here? What is the point of all this? Yeah, so I've been in rescues where it's been really greatly successful, and then situations like that where your hands are tied, you can do nothing at all. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna give that information. You want to give the name of the organization now, because I don't think you mentioned it yet.
Yeah, I started a foundation 1 year ago. It's called WeCanSaveChildren.org. Yeah.
WeCanSaveChildren.org.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm sorry. Did you have
Yes.
How many, because I mean, all this is terrible. How many successful missions approximately have you had? How many children do you think you've saved?
1,200.
Yeah. And it's amazing. It's a lot, but there's also a lot.
It sounds like a
still to
lot,
be-
but
there's a lot still to be done, of
you
course.
think about,
But at least something positive.
Yeah, no, for sure.
No, I'm sorry. You had
No,
another
go
question?
ahead, go ahead.
I think Edmund has a question.
When you save them, what happens to them after that?
A good question. Again, depending what country. Usually there are shelters in place. Shelters, depending, I mean, some of these children have been enslaved for 5, 6, 7 years. Yeah. As an adult, can you imagine? No, it's impossible. And just for what they have been through, it's horrific, right? And so they have to go through, like anything, you know, psychotherapy. This is going to take anywhere from 9 to 18 months just to bring them back. And not all of them come back into society. Yeah. Some of them, again, you know, they've been sold by their parents. Some of them have been kidnapped. And so you have to then bring them back into society and hopefully, usually not necessarily with their parents, but extended family, aunts, uncles, grandparents, to bring them back and find the family. And so there are things in place, but it's going to take a while. Yeah.
So, we're drawing to the end. Excuse me, I just had a little coughing fit.
Oh, that's
we're drawing to the end of this great interview, and there's so much more to talk about and ask. But we'll bring them back again in the future for more updates and such forth. But there's one question that I have to ask, because when I first told Vincent about this show, and you know, we took a name play off of the show Inside the Actor Studio, of
great
course.
name.
So it's
I
Inside
wish I
the
came
Action
up with
Studio. And so he said, you have to ask this question at the end. Now, so we're going to ask it just for him.
Okay.
Out of James Lipton's famous 10 questions.
Oh no!
We're going to
no,
ask
no,
we're
no.
going to ask the last one.
Oh no!
All right. You said you wanted that.
You're right.
So he said,
God.
James, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates? Caught him off guard.
Thank God you made it.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, we're inside the Action Studio, Ironbound Studios, with our guest Vincent Lin. Want to thank you for coming out, man. It was a great conversation.
Great. I love that last question.
Yeah, yeah.
I know. I'm going to get lots of questions from that.
Yeah, man. So thank you for coming out. We're glad,
thank you,
and
thank you.
we hope to have you back again soon, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Please, is this still on? Please, everybody go to the website, wecansavechildren.org. Whatever you can do, check out the website, whatever you can do to help, please.
Thank you. Thank you.